Genesis chapter 3. Genesis 3. The title is Counterfeit Christianity. Counterfeit Christianity. Genesis 3, verse 4. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God knoweth that in the day ye eat thereof. Wait a minute. What's he know about God? Obviously, he's spinning a story, and she thinks he sounds pretty authoritative. Then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So he thinks he's a god. Well, he sort of is. Verse 6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, seems like what he's saying is right, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. I got good motives. She wants to be wise. She took the fruit thereof, and then became an evangelist, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. That's the way it goes. Counterfeit. Counterfeit money is a bad thing. We love to identify counterfeits. I don't know why that is. I just think it's normal to humans to like to see what the counterfeit is. Where is it different? They have Louis Vuitton makes bags for women, and there's all these knockoffs. And so if you know what you're looking at, you can identify whether it's the real deal or it's a fake one. Of course, money is intentionally engineered to be hard to counterfeit so that it can be identified. A retailer or a merchant or an individual can be defrauded by not knowing they're accepting counterfeit money. And so that's bad news, because if I accept your money and it ain't real money, then I got nothing. Because the bank is going to know. I won't take it to the bank. The person who uses counterfeit cash to purchase goods or services may be arrested and charged with a crime or crimes, whether you knew it or not.
It's federal, too.
State and federal, correct. So we really should know whether or not we've got counterfeit money. If somebody passes us a bill of sales that's just junk, we need to know it. We're supposed to have one of those stupid little pens, but we don't. We do it once. Yeah. But what if the person that has been offered this false money doesn't know he's got false money? That's his fault. The use of counterfeit currency can violate both federal and state law. Under federal law, the user or someone who attempts to use counterfeit currency is considered an illegal operation, even though you didn't know it. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to press charges, but they could. A conviction for the offense carries up to 20 years in prison and a fine. That's serious. Now, usually they don't do that because they can tell right up front when you say, "Oh, ma'am, that's a counterfeit bill." The response they get back is going to tell them, "Oh, are you serious? Where's it? I just got that from the bank." Or something like that. But imagine this. If we counterfeit something that's supposed to be currency from heaven, don't you know that the real judge up there, the police force he's got in place, is not going to let you pass on it? If the government's down here don't let you pass on it, God sure ain't. So we better know the real deal versus the counterfeit. The first thing I see about the counterfeit is Romans chapter 1. Counterfeit Christianity is without excuse according to God. They don't have an excuse. When he gave us the Bible, that was the legitimate. So you should be able to hold that against anything that comes out, anything anybody says, and know what the real deal is. Now, if you had a real dollar bill and you had a fake one, you could compare the two. You get a microscope and look at this one and look at that one, and, find out which one is real and which one is not, knowing which one is right. Now, for us, we know the Bible is right, period. So you line that up with any philosophy or any line somebody's trying to give you. But you got to know the Bible to know where to look. And then you can line it up. Romans 1 verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. That's tough. He said right there, you don't even have to have a Bible, and I'm not going to say you've got an excuse. Modern Christianity gives you an excuse for anything. Biblically, we don't get any excuses. When we sin, it's our fault. Nobody made us do it. It's not because you grew up in a bad neighborhood. There are no excuses. None. We've all been given the same book and we're all accountable. Period. In John chapter 15, John 15 verse 22. John 15:22. If I had not come and spoke unto them, this is Jesus speaking, they had not had sin, but now they have no cloak for their sin. Now, look at that verse because it's a tough one. He says, if I had not come and talked to them, then they wouldn't have had sin. Well, sure they would have. They still were sinners. They would have had sin regardless. Now they know they have sin. There's no excuse. It's been laid out in plain English. Only it wasn't English, it was whatever language you were speaking. It's been laid out in a communication style they understand, and God knows they know. And for us, for sure, when we violate things we know are wrong. Now, there's a whole nother side of that. We could know certain things are wrong, and he has mercy on that for a little while, and he decides. I can't be the deciding factor on that. But God does. At some point he says, I've given you enough time and you should have known this by now. And then he lowers the boom. But here he's speaking of things they know because he's just told them. He says they have no cloak for their sin. I've laid out the facts black and white. I posted speed limit signs, every 3 foot down the road. So there's no excuse. That's what he's saying. There's no... they can't say a tree was in the way. Well, what about the 15 other signs that you just passed by? Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter 2, verse 15. 1 Peter 2:15. The context is you've been doing good and you got punished for it. That's good. That's acceptable. 1 Peter 2:15. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God. Now, people use this right here. A cloak of maliciousness. That is, I'm going to push the boundary on sin just as far as I can, because I'll cloak this sin in I didn't know, or I didn't go all the way with that sin, so I didn't break the rule. I mean, I just got it right smack dab as close as I can get to it. That's the cloak they're putting on. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be servants of God. And there's that cloak. There is no excuse in real religion. In true Christianity, biblical Christianity, we're accountable to God. So if it lines up with God, good. If it doesn't, throw it out. But modern Christianity says, do what you want to. You're at liberty. It's grace. Have all the fun you want. Anything goes. It's just between you and God, and not really just between you. You make up your own rules. We're not going to judge you. God sure is. That sets a bad precedent. If the preacher and the other supposed leaders of the church say, we can't judge you for what you do, your action, then that puts in their mind, nobody's going to judge me. God's going to judge. We're supposed to be holy. The next thing I see is in Ephesians 2, verse 12. This counterfeit Christianity has no satisfying hope. Their hope is very temporary. And it's not really hope. It's selfish gratification. That's what they consider hope. They don't know real hope. In Ephesians 2, verse 12, that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise. Now don't get sidetracked on all that. He's saying you were without God. The people who were with God obviously knew it because he gave them covenants and promises, and he wrote down things for them, and they knew it was direct from him. You didn't have that. You were without God. And those people who are without God are this next thing right here, having no hope and without God in the world. A lot of Christians would fall into that category right there. They're without hope. They really don't have hope because their hope is in things of this world. Can the things of this world fall apart and you still have hope? We should. If you have the true religion, real Christianity, biblical, then your hope is not found in any of this mess that we find down here. Family can fall apart. That's sad, but you can still have hope. Your hope is eternal. It's not here. This world is going to be burnt. Why would I put my hope in anything that's going to be here? That's a bonfire waiting to be. Isaiah chapter 44. Isaiah 44, verse 6. This is God talking, and he's bragging about Jesus. So you know this can be a good verse. Isaiah 44, 6. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. Who's your Redeemer? Jesus Christ. I am the first, and I am the last, and besides me ain't nothing in between. Beside me there is no God. So there's where hope's found. Putting your hope anywhere else is not hitting the mark. He told you right there where it is. I'm all there is. You focus on anything else, it's just vain. It's empty. Galatians chapter 4. Galatians 4, verse 8. Howbeit then, when you knew not God, you did service unto them which by nature are no gods. So this is what man does with a imitation religion. He sets you up little gods. Now, the little gods can be either extreme. They can be legalism or liberalism. Legalism is, here's the set of rules we go by, and if we don't wear any horn-rimmed glasses in here, and women can't wear pants, and all that stuff. And then if you do that, you're a good boy. If you don't, well, a good person. And if you don't do that, then you're on the naughty list. Liberalism will go to the other extreme. We just love everybody, love you, accept, and give them a warm hug every day that we see them, and everything's fine. Okay, both of those are extremes, but they set up a God. One God is written down on paper, and these are our rules, homemade rules. The other one is you are God, and everybody is their own God, and we accept everybody. Well, okay, that's living without the true God. And you know what ends up happening? You have to do service to those gods. Legalism says you serve these rules right here. This is what you must do. Liberalism says you serve everybody else. If it offends somebody else, then you change how you appear. You become a chameleon. Okay, both of those are serving the wrong thing. We should serve God himself. In Romans chapter 10, Romans 10, verse 13. This is a passage of Scripture everybody should have memorized. Romans 10:13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Good verse to know. Now, he's going to give you the context. He does this backwards. He's going to give you the context for that. What he just did was he set up a word problem. He did algebra on you. He gave you the answer. Now he's going to show you how you got to the answer. Verse 14. How then shall they call on him whom they've not believed? And how shall they believe in him whom they've not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. Now, that's what we do as Christians. We're bringing glad tidings of good things. The good things we're bringing and the glad tidings is you can have peace with God. There is a way that you can make him happy. It's found in Jesus Christ. Amen. And your sin can be forgiven and blotted out and gone, disappear. You can fail and God will forgive you. That's the glad tidings we bring. The glad tidings are not what makes you happy and I'll agree with it. That's not glad tidings. That's putting somebody else in charge. Okay, so that's no enduring hope. No satisfaction that lasts. That's the counterfeit the world offers. The other thing we see is Philippians 2, verse 14. They're without self-control. Philippians 2:14. Watch modern religion. They turn the reins over to you instead of putting them in God's hands. The reins God has, he's already told you where the boundaries are. That's him holding the reins. And to be biblical, I can't tell you you can push the boundary. To be biblical, I've got to tell you where he sets the line. He's drawn a line in the sand. You're getting really close. Let me show you where it is. Then it's between you and God what you do with it. The modern age is this. What you really need to do when you get frustrated is you need to vent. You just need to throw a fit and tell somebody you'll feel better. That's not Bible. Bible says you don't vent. That's giving place to the devil. That's what that's doing. And the world's philosophy is this. You need to set up a room for the devil. And just every now and then when life gets hard, you and he go in there and have a good sit down and, talk it out and you'll be fine. Because he does pat them on the back and they feel fine. Remember, Eve felt fine for just a little bit. And then it ain't so fine. Philippians 2, verse 14. He says, do all things without murmurings and disputings. All things. I don't think he left anything out. That's tough. That says we can't murmur. None. Okay, true religion, biblical Christianity, does not give you a license to murmur about anything. Man, this is getting heavy tonight. Exodus chapter 16. Exodus 16, verse 7. And in the morning ye shall see the glory of the Lord, for that he heareth your murmurings against the Lord. And what are we that you murmur against us? Whew. They hadn't been murmuring against the Lord. They were murmuring against Moses and Aaron. And he says, you're murmuring against the Lord. And what is that mess you're bringing my name into it? It's got nothing to do with me. It's God who's responsible for this. And God's taking it personal. And he's coming down here and you're going to see him tomorrow. You wait till I get home, is what he's saying. That's tough stuff right there. Murmuring gets God's attention, and not in a good way. Psalms 106. Psalms 106, verse 25. It says, but murmured in their tents, and hearkened not unto the voice of the Lord. Here's why murmuring's so bad. When your mouth's moving, your ears ain't listening.
I hear you.
That's it. Murmuring causes you to not listen to God. When a person decides they're going to vent, they're not venting saying, what does the Bible say about this situation? How do I find an answer biblically that God is happy with? They're not listening. They're telling. And murmuring is bad. Now, there is a difference. I want to make this clear. There's a difference between you are allowed to talk to somebody about your problems. I'm not saying you can't do that. You can go to somebody and say, look, I'm having a problem here. Give me some biblical advice. How do you see this? What should I do? I'm not saying you can't do that. But I am saying, if you don't want Bible instruction, you shouldn't be talking. You can't just come in and look for somebody to pat you on the back and agree with you. That's murmuring. I've got it so bad, don't you agree? Nobody's had it as bad as me. That's murmuring. Now, it's fine to get advice. Hey, I've had a tough time. I don't see the out to this. Can you shed some light on my situation that I'm not seeing? And then be willing to do something about it. But if you're just talking and you don't want to change, that's murmuring, and God gets mad. Psalms 100, we just did that one. Look at Mark chapter 14. Mark 14, verse 5. Christians love to do this. They love to get their nose in somebody else's business and then start venting about it as though it had something to do with them. Mark 14, verse 5. This, of course, is Judas. And he's mad because this perfume's been spilled on Jesus' hair, and he didn't like that. He said, man, they could have sold that and given me the money. Only he's tricky. For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and had been given to the poor. I'm so poor. And they murmured against her. Problem with murmuring is it always involves somebody else. We found them murmuring in their tent, but they weren't murmuring to themselves. They were murmuring with a family present. It's going to affect somebody else. Here Judas is murmuring, but he's doing it so it affects the other disciples or somebody around him. And they all murmur against her. Get so comfortable in your Christianity that whatever somebody else is doing, it doesn't push you off balance. If somebody else has decided their ministry is to pass out tracts, and all they do every time you see them, they're passing out a tract, don't murmur about it. That might not be the ministry God's called you to, but don't murmur about it. Let it be. Be happy for somebody else's ministry. Some people have a ministry of street preaching. Okay, good. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but you should be happy they're doing it. Somebody's ministry is to help the poor. And that's what they live for. To go find poor people and help them. That doesn't mean you have to do it. But be happy that they're finding something God wants them to do. And you know what's normal? Because it's not our ministry, we want to say, that's just a waste of time. Think of what they could have been doing. All the money they've spent on that, they could have put in my pocket. That's where it goes. That's that murmuring. Jude chapter 1. Like there's another one. But Jude verse 15. This is an old message, very old. This is Enoch's message. Jude 1 verse 15. This is the punchline to his message. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. He's not talking about saints here. If he is, they're ungodly saints. Verse 16, these are murmurers. First description of ungodly people is murmurers. Whew, that's heavy. Complainers, walking after their own lust, and their mouth speaking great swelling words. So, usually great swelling words does not necessarily mean it's harsh. Usually that's a convincing argument, or it's speech that you enjoy. Great swelling words. They're big and they captivate your attention. Having men's person in admiration because of advantage. Whew, that's murmuring, so we don't want to murmur. Now that's the philosophy of a counterfeit Christian cult. What that is, we're not offensive here, and if you're having a bad day, just talk about it. Just vent a little bit. It'll do you good. Okay, that's not Christianity. And when Christianity cloaks itself as though that's Christianity, that's a counterfeit. And you can take that one right back to the bank and say, go ahead and shred that one. Look at the next one is Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews 9 verse 22. Counterfeit Christianity is avoiding offending man. Now, I don't mean offend man just because you can offend them. If we put our mind to it, we could offend everybody.
Even not putting our mind to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, usually that doesn't take much thought. It just comes natural. Now, by the same token, we don't want to offend man. However, we're not so concerned about offending man if the other option is it offends God. There is a priority, and man's way down on the list. Hebrews 9 verse 22. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without the shedding of blood is no remission. Wow. Modern Christianity gives you a gospel that has no blood. That means it's dead. Life comes from blood. If your Christianity doesn't offer blood, it ain't Christianity and it's dead. Matter of fact, sin makes God so mad he says I should see red when there is sin. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission. You couldn't have gotten saved if somebody didn't tell you Jesus Christ died on the cross and bled and died for you, and it's his blood that saves your soul. The Old Testament, every time you sinned, God said, I want to see blood or I'm not going to forgive it. Unless there's sin, or unless there's blood, sin doesn't get washed out. It's the only thing that washes it away. And let's look at a few of them. In Leviticus chapter 4. Leviticus 4 verse 20. Leviticus 4:20. And he shall do with the bullock as he did with the bullock for the sin offering. So shall he do with this. And the priest shall make an atonement for them. Atonement, that's good. And it shall be forgiven them. An offering has to be made. The offering that has to be made is a sinless lamb. A bullock in this case right here has to die. And there's got to be bloodshed. And we're going to see it's not only blood, but fire. Two things that are key elements in true Christianity: blood and fire. If somebody doesn't mention hell and they don't mention the blood of Jesus Christ, look out. You're probably getting a counterfeit. Because without those two elements, you don't have God's idea of what's going on. Look at it in verse 26. And he shall burn all his fat upon the altar, as the fat of the sacrifice of the peace offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him as concerning his sin, and it shall be forgiven him. That's a great phrase. It shall be forgiven.
Amen.
But whatever, all that stuff that comes before, it's pretty painful. Leviticus 4:35. And he shall take away all the fat thereof, as the fat of the lamb is taken away from the sacrifice of the peace offering. And the priest shall burn them upon the altar, according to the offering made by fire unto the Lord. The priest shall make an atonement for his sin that he hath committed, and it shall be forgiven him. But it requires something, an atonement. God doesn't just forget it. You can't just do some more good works and it outweighs the bad ones. There has to be an atonement made. The atonement is blood. Leviticus 5 verse 10. Leviticus 5:10. He shall offer the second for a burnt offering according to the manner, and the priest shall make an atonement for him for his sins which he has sinned, and it shall be forgiven him. That was the first story out of the garden, was Cain and Abel. One of them decided blood was important. One of them decided he could produce more good works. God said, I'll take one, the other one's going to be rejected. You think about it, Cain did all the work. He grew that fruit. He cultivated it. If you do any farming, you realize that growing something ain't easy. And you put a lot of time and effort into it. That tomato is worth something to you. And so when he comes up there with the fruit salad, it meant something to him. You know, that was representative of sweat and tears. What did Abel do? He followed the sheep around the pasture.
Probably ate his fruit.
Went over there, shaved the thing, and got him a coat. I mean, how hard was that? And then he just offered that. And Abel, it looks like in comparison between the two, Abel should come up short in comparison to all the effort that Cain's gone through. But no, God says sin can only be wiped out by blood. So it's important that there is blood present. There's other passages, I won't go through them all. Leviticus 5:12, Leviticus 5:18, Leviticus 6:7, Leviticus 17:11. All of those tell you that the blood is required. All the way from the beginning of the Bible through, you learn there's something special about blood. God requires blood to cover something wicked. The something wicked is sin. And sin is so bad that unless something dies, it can't be forgiven. And the something that dies has to be perfect. That introduces you to Jesus Christ when he shows up. But if we nowadays, working backwards, present a Jesus Christ that did not shed blood, and sin was not the penalty for, or hell was not the penalty for sin, we've offered them a counterfeit that the rest of the Bible doesn't match. The other thing is Hebrews 11:6. Counterfeit Christianity says God doesn't punish. That's just a fact. If you're his child, expect him to correct you. And that's good, because you know what's right and wrong. If you don't ever get any correction, you're going to wind up playing in the street. That's why when you head out the door, the dad says, hey, remember, stay with him at the street. Well, God's going to do the same thing with us. He says, Hebrews 11 verse 6, but without faith, oh, I've gone down too far. Where are we? Where did I tell you? Okay, remind me, I'll come back to that one. I've skipped in my outline. You'd think I've never done this before. Look at Hebrews 12 verse 8. Hebrews 12 verse 8. He says, but if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are you bastards and not sons. He said, if you're really in the family, it's okay. God's going to correct you. Don't get your feelings hurt. That's a good thing. That means God wants you to do the right stuff, and He's got His eye on you, and He's keeping you from making a big mess. That should be encouragement. But you know how we normally react to that? We pout and say, how dare he, and life is so bad, and I've got it so rough. No, He's just saying, I'm keeping you from getting to the street out there. Yeah, it's an electric fence. You know that now. But getting a little shock is a whole lot better than getting run over by the Mack truck. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter 5, verse 10. But the God of all grace, who hath called us unto His eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. That's what His correction does. His correction does this. It's for a purpose. He's not going to correct you and punish you because He wants a laugh. That's not God. That's sadistic. That's satanic. What God does, anytime He has to correct you, it's for your betterment. He wants your end to be this. Perfect. Established, strengthened, and settled. Boy, you can look at that list and you can put yourself on the list, but you can definitely see it when you look at other Christians and you think, man, they need to settle. They're up and down and in and out, and they're believing this and then turn around, they're believing that, and they're all over the place. They're not settled yet. Okay, they got some things to go through. They've got to suffer a little while. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16. Second Corinthians 4:16. Here's Paul being super spiritual. Don't you wish you could be like Paul? Here's what he says we should be thinking. 2 Corinthians 4:16. For which cause we faint not. That is, you still breathing? Okay, there's a reason for that. God didn't kill you. However bad it got, you're still alive. So you can read this verse. For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. It was for our good, and the good I'm talking about is on the other side that lasts forever. Not like this outward man. Your flesh is going to die. You're going to get old. You're going to fall apart. Happy good times. But guess what? If through your falling apart, you can build the inward man, you've got something that's going to outlast anything you could have had you been Arnold Schwarzenegger till you were 90 years old. Only he ain't Arnold Schwarzenegger much anymore. Other thing about this counterfeit Christianity is they believe in fact over faith. Now this appeals to someone who's actually saved, and they think they're going to pull a Hagar and help God out because the world needs facts. So rather than tell them they just have to believe God created this thing just like He said He did, I need to prove to them that He did. No, you just need to tell them He did. Believe it or leave it. That's what He said. I don't have to prove it to you. And you don't always have to have the answer as far as you can put on a piece of paper and plot it with a scientist and all that. God requires some faith. He'll give you some facts too, but by and large, there's going to come a point where no fact is going to line up, and you've got to choose. He says faith's required. Hebrews 11 verse 6. That without faith, it is impossible to please him. So you know how it's possible to please him? With faith. Therefore, he's going to do things in your life that require faith. Most Christians want to play the odds. Okay, if 2 plus 2 equals 4, I'm sitting on 2, here comes 2 more, that must equal 4. Not always. Faith is always in algebra they put letters in. You got all of these numbers, and then they throw letters up there. What does that mean? That is faith. In your life, a Christian has that type of a formula. 2 plus 2 equals God plus question mark. We don't know yet. He's going to do something. I just got to follow the formula, and whatever he says, that's the fact. In Psalms chapter 106, verse 21. Psalm 106, verse 21. This is a tough one, and I'm including this in the counterfeit Christianity thing because, really, if we get dogmatic, we really should say this. But it's something we got to preach to ourselves all the time. Psalm 106, verse 21. They forgot God, their Savior, which had done great things in Egypt. Okay, he has for us too. Egypt's a picture of the world. We've got to live in this world. And he's done some great things for us while we've been living here. So we should be able to look back and say, there's the mystery number right there. I know he's going to be able to get me out of this. I messed up. I asked for forgiveness. And he's going to take care of the problem. Now, this is the other thing. People want to say, if you messed up, you're going to pay for it. Not necessarily. Has he ever punished you according to what your sins deserve? Okay. So it's always a good time to ask for forgiveness for sin, because the outcome will be way less than it would have been. Because that's right. He never punishes us according to what we deserve. So ask for forgiveness, and guess what? The mystery formula comes back into play. Look at verse 22, Psalm 106, verse 22. Wondrous works in the land of Ham, that's Egypt, and terrible things by the Red Sea. We've seen some big things, great things, and we've seen some horrible destruction of enemy. Him just wiping them out. So we know what God can do. The implication here is they should have been using their imagination for good. And we have to too. Look at verse 24. Yea, they despised the pleasant land. They believed not his word. Wow. That's faith. Faith says you've got good. You're sitting in good right now. However, we can easily imagine something bad about whatever situation we're in. But that's imagination. The fact of the matter is God always does us good. So wherever we are, the right thing to do is not despise the pleasant land. The fact of the matter is, if you're a Christian, you're sitting in a pleasant land. You're in Goshen. Now, you can look around you and all you see is Egypt, but your property is in Goshen. It's a pleasant land. Don't despise his pleasant land, because that leads to not believing his word. Okay, and now I'm skipping back down to where we should have been. Okay. The next one I see is Hebrews 12, verse 14. This one I call the counterfeit philosophy of be a humanitarian, don't be a holy Joe. That's a philosophy the world has. The world has, show them you're such a great person, don't preach to them. Don't let holiness offend get in the way of being a humanitarian. Now, we should be a humanitarian. He says, do good to all men, especially them that are of the household of faith. So it's good to be a humanitarian. If you can help a little old lady cross the street, go ahead and use that bumper. I mean, help her. Help her across the street. That's being a humanitarian. However, that doesn't shine a candle in comparison to being holy. That's what God requires. Hebrews 12, verse 14. Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. So the modern counterfeit Christianity makes light of holiness because that's what people will see the Lord in. Guess what? There's a lot of lost humanitarians out there. And we don't see God in them. We see them in them. But if you're holy, there won't be any mistaking. That's God. That's not humanitarian. That's not because you're so rich you just had to give it away to everybody and nobody's going to mistake it. Godliness always creates holiness. In Romans chapter 6, Romans 6 verse 22. But now, being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness, and the end everlasting life. Get a life. This one's forever. Everlasting life. Now, let's back the formula up. How did it start? Freed from sin, you got saved. Okay, that's great. Now, what did anybody take the next step? We should have. And we got to wake up every day and say, step, boy, step. Here's the next step. Become servants to God. When you wake up in the morning, it should be, okay, I'm Butler Jojo, and I'm here to serve God. That's your job. You're a servant to God. And so the servant does what? He goes to the refrigerator and brings God some fruit. Here's the fruit. Holiness. Plate full of holiness. That's what he wants to see. And the end of your service is retirement. Everlasting life. That's a good retirement program.
Amen.
In 2 Corinthians 6, 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17. How did this get so long? I know it. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17. Wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. That's harsh right there, but that's just Bible. Now, modern Christianity would skip that verse or find a way to change it so it didn't sound so strict. It's not strict toward a man, you see that? It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with you individually coming out from among them, and the them, he'll let you know who the them be. And he says, be separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. That's just tough. Don't touch it. You mean like this? Like that? Isn't that what a little kid does? When you tell them don't touch it, they get close to it. They put the back of their hand on it. Did you see that? I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. Yeah. Okay, that's what he's saying about there's a whole bunch of wickedness in this world. And you can't live, you can't open your eyes, you can't even go in a dark room and think for about 2 seconds without being confronted with wickedness. And he says, don't touch it. Get so scared of wickedness that you don't touch it. And then there's a benefit. I will receive you. That is, you'll be running from, and he says, I'll catch you. When you start running from wickedness, you end up being received by the receiver. The wide receiver is Jesus Christ. You'll run right into him. 2 Corinthians 7. 2 Corinthians 7, verse 1. Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit. Okay, so I gotta quit stopping. Okay, we're almost done. So, filthiness of the flesh. Where's your flesh? It's right here. That's physical. That's on the outside. Where's your spirit? It's on the inside. I can't touch that. So you have two types of filth that need to be cleansed. The big ones that everybody can see. He's smoking again. That's so wicked. Okay, well maybe you're being critical is wicked too. Okay, there's two types that need to be cleansed. The outside and the inside. Perfecting holiness in the fear of God. Now, who's doing the cleansing here? I just want to make this side note because it's important. I have to do my own cleansing. God's not going to do that for me. He doesn't say if you get so many steps into this thing, then I take over and I clean you up and you never have... No, you have to take the responsibility for this. Let us cleanse ourselves. It's my responsibility. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 15. 1 Peter 1, verse 15. But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation. Now, I hear people that love the Greek and the Hebrew, they'll tell you conversation. In the Bible, the word conversation didn't really mean conversation. It meant manner of life, Oh yeah, that's the standard interpretation. It doesn't mean words, it means manner of life. And say, okay, well now you've just limited what the Bible says. It means both. It means conversation. You can have a conversation. I can see somebody having a conversation and not know what they're saying and know what they're saying. When he's going and she's going like this, then you say, okay, she's getting her orders. Okay, but there was a conversation going on and I could read it clearly without hearing a word. He says all manner of conversation. Well, that meant verbal and maybe not verbal. All of it should be holy. Holy, holy. So if you have any type of religion that does allow you to not be holy, we're not so holy, holy here, well, get out. Because it's supposed to be holy, holy. You should be known as Holy Joe. That's what you want. The leaders that are not pushing holiness are of the devil, because the devil is not holy. If it's a biblical religion and God called you, God is holy, therefore you should be holy. Now that's how you know the counterfeit. 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 3. Chapter 2 is good too, but 1 John chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 2. Beloved, now are we the sons of God. Well, good. We had to go all the way through the Bible to finally find it. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And every man that hath this hope in him purifieth himself, even as he is pure. So here's some proof of legitimate Christianity. If a person is really a son of God, they've been born again, and they have the hope of eternity with Christ, that hope is in them, they will purify themselves. They'll become holy. That's their goal. True Christianity, the goal of true Christianity on this side of the grave is to get as holy as we can get. That should be our goal. And I don't know why it's become a bragging point amongst megachurches that we're not, we don't read our Bible all the time and sit around and talk about spiritual things 24/7. Why not? Maybe that should be, we're ashamed we don't. Okay. The goal is holiness. Colossians chapter 4. And now we're done. Colossians 4 verse 5. What do we do? How do we fix this counterfeit that we've been passed? This bad bill of sale? Well, you can correct these people. Colossians 4 verse 5. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. So he says it's going to take some wisdom on your part. So when somebody passes you a counterfeit bill spiritually, you have to tell them it's counterfeit. Don't accept. That's asking yourself to get ripped off. Okay, we're charging $25 for this project right here, and then they come in with monopoly money, and rather than offend them, you say, okay, thank you, stick it in your pocket knowing you didn't get paid. Well, that didn't do anybody any good. Now they think they can pass monopoly money around. Okay, spiritually, when you see all these counterfeits that are posing themselves as though they're Christianity, you need to let them know they got counterfeit. Somebody passed them a wrong bill. Somebody was printing that up in the devil's basement. Okay, it's not real. Let me show you in the Bible. Now he says to do it with wisdom. Sometimes that needed to be handled the way Paul did when he called out names and says, watch out, I've turned this person over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. I mean, sometimes it's severe. You say, I know you printed this up and you knew what you were doing and this is counterfeit and you know it's counterfeit. Okay, sometimes that's the response, but sometimes it's, hey, I know you didn't realize that. Somebody gave you some wrong money. And so you educate them. You try to bring them along. Say, hey, look, ask around. Go take it to any bank you want. Go to any real church. They'll tell you, this ain't the real deal. Let me show it to you in the Bible. That's how we handle it. Those that are without. There's a lot of fakers out there, and they're without excuse according to the Bible. And we can give them the facts. All right.